In first century Palestine, a wedding was a huge event. And the guest list wasn't just limited to the people that you wanted to invite. The guest list was the entire village. Everyone in your village would come to the wedding, and if you knew people in surrounding villages because of associations, they would come too. And because there were so many people, and because the people had to travel by foot, a wedding lasted a week. It was a week of eating and drinking and feasting and celebrating as you waited for a critical mass of people to arrive. And you were responsible for making sure they had enough to eat and drink. But not just by yourself. The expectation was that people would bring food and beverage with them as well. And in today's gospel, we hear that we are in the midst of a wedding ceremony that Jesus and his disciples have been invited to, his mother as well, and they have a crisis. They're out of wine. Now, this is a little different than we might think, because in that culture and time, water was precious, fresh water was difficult to come by, and wine was the mainstay beverage. So they don't have anything to drink, and they're going to be there for several more days. This is a huge crisis. We don't know whether it was precipitated because the family did not plan ahead, whether people didn't bring enough, whether the family was too poor to have enough for everybody that showed up. But whatever the reason, they're out. And it's going to be a problem, not only because the people will have nothing to drink for 2 or 3 days, but because of shame. In this culture, honor was huge. You didn't want to do anything that brought shame to you or your family or your children. Can you imagine? If you ran out of wine and everybody knew about it and there was nothing to drink, the disaster that would befall that particular family. For the rest of their life, as they walked around town, people would tell the story. Oh, there's so-and-so. You remember that wedding? That was the wedding where we all about died of thirst because there was no wine. And it would go on and on and on and on. It would become epic. You know how those stories grow. With each telling, it gets worse, and the disaster more, and the shame greater, and that poor family would never live it down. And in the midst of that, Jesus offers his first sign as an adult. He tells the servants to fill these purification stone jars with water, lift some out and take it to the steward of the feast. They knew they poured water in those jars. They knew that when the steward drank it, it was wine. They knew something amazing had happened. And the steward recognized that the wine was exceptionally good. Surprisingly good. Not only in Jesus' first sign does wine come out of water, but only the best. God's kingdom is here, and God only offers the best to us. Jesus continues the pattern that is throughout the Hebrew Scriptures and has happened up to this point, which is that it is the least favored that God is paying attention to. Neither the bride, nor the groom, nor the steward of the feast, nor the family of the bride and groom ever knew they ran out of wine. The only people who got to see that sign were the help, who were serving the people. When Jesus' birth was announced, it was announced to a young woman who lived in a hick town, Nazareth. It was told that she would bear the Son of God. The man to whom she was betrothed, who also lived in that hick town, was told, "You will be the foster father of the Son of God, and you are to protect him and his mother." When the birth came in Bethlehem, the only people that heard about it from the angel armies of God were the dirtiest of the dirty in the culture, the shepherds in the fields who in their mangy state, came wandering into town, wandering into the shepherds, into the cave where the birth was. And they found the baby lying in the manger. The only people who knew that this toddler, as he began to grow, was the Son of God were pagan astrologers from a faraway land who came looking for the King of the Jews, who had been born because they saw his star. And Jesus would repeat this pattern over and over and over in his adult ministry. He was always called to the carpet for being with the wrong kind of people, doing the wrong kind of things. Does he not know who he's with? Does he not know what those people are? Does he not know who they are, what they haven't done, what they have done? Jesus continued to show the pattern throughout history that God favors, God is present with those that the world abandons, those that the world has turned its back on, those that the powers of the world refuse to acknowledge. And would say, it is not well people who need a physician, it is sick people. So he moved into that neighborhood, and wherever people were in need, wherever people were forgotten, wherever people were abused and neglected, that was where you found Jesus. And that pattern did not end at his death and his resurrection. For wherever in the world we find those who are forgotten, there we will find God. God is present with children who have been separated from their parents. God is present with refugees seeking asylum. God is present with those who find themselves in war-torn lands, bombed to oblivion, where their governments could care nothing about them. God is present with a Native American man singing cultural songs at the Lincoln Memorial while young adolescent teenage boys jeer at him. God is present with a young man who finds himself in prison with an unusually harsh sentence because he happened to be black and from the urban inner city instead of white and from the suburbs. God is present with those who have had a tragic loss and who grieve over the one that they have lost. God is present with those who find themselves working with no pay in a government shutdown. God is present with those who have no home and who come seeking shelter, who will come this next week to this place looking for something to eat and some place to sleep. God always is with those the world abandons. God is always seeking the lost. The only question for us is, will we find ourselves where our Savior is?